Science fiction has always promised escape, yet just as often it has delivered a mirror, one that reflects our deepest fears and hidden truths. What happens when the dream collapses into nightmare, when the journey ends in revelation too cruel or too beautiful to bear? Tonight, we rediscover 12 sci-fi masterpieces whose endings still leave audiences breathless. First, Planet of the Apes, 1968. The image is unforgettable. A lone astronaut, ragged and weary, rides a horse along a desolate shoreline. The waves crash, the sky burns, and then ruin. A statue shattered in the sand, an icon of human pride toppled. That is the frame where cinema froze and history gasped. Charlton Heston's Taylor was no typical hero. Bitter, cynical, tired of mankind, he blasted into the stars only to land in a world that felt both alien and familiar. Captured by intelligent apes, stripped of dignity, and forced into silence, he became a prisoner of evolution's cruel irony. His unlikely bond with Nova, a mute woman, gave his exile a tender undercurrent, a whisper of hope amid despair. Released in 1968, Franklin J. Schaffner's Planet of the Apes arrived at a cultural crossroads. Civil rights struggles, the Vietnam War, assassinations, America was unraveling, and so too was the myth of human supremacy. Critics praised its ambition, audiences devoured its spectacle, and beneath the rubber masks and pulp dialogue lay a philosophy that dared to ask, what if humanity was its own undoing? The twist ending shocked an era unaccustomed to cinematic nihilism. It wasn't just surprise, it was accusation. The ruin on the beach was a mirror turned toward every viewer. Decades later, the moment remains iconic, endlessly parodied, but never diminished. Its power lies not in shock alone, but in the silence that follows. The silence where we ask, have we changed, or are we still marching toward the sand? 2. Soylent Green, 1973. The film begins with overcrowded streets, smog-stained skies, and humanity suffocating under its own weight. New York in 2022, an imagined future that feels eerily like today. In this suffocating dystopia, food is scarce, truth scarcer, people queue for colored wafers, branded as salvation, and behind those colors hides something monstrous. Charlton Heston once again guides us through despair, this time as Detective Thorne, a weary cop scavenging truth from decay. His companion, Sol Roth, played by the magnificent Edward G. Robinson in his final role, anchors the film with sorrowful wisdom. Their friendship is fragile, tender, a human heartbeat in a city that has forgotten what humanity means. Directed by Richard Fleischer, Soylent Green emerged in 1973, steeped in post-Watergate paranoia and environmental dread. Its release tapped into public fears of overpopulation, pollution, and corporate greed. It wasn't the spectacle of rockets or aliens. It was the horror of tomorrow collapsing under today's negligence. Critics were divided, some dismissing it as melodrama, others praising its bleak warning. The revelation, shouted in desperation, became one of cinema's most quoted lines. Yet, beyond the meme, lies tragedy. For Thorne's cry is not just discovery, but futility. The world he exposes is too broken to mend. That ending forces viewers to leave the theater unsettled, clutching the echo of his words like a wound. Nearly 50 years later, Soylent Green feels less like fiction and more like prophecy. Its final image is not a twist for shock's sake, but a verdict, a reminder that sometimes the darkest futures are the ones we carve with our own hands. 3. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1978. A city alive with chatter. Friends at coffee shops, lovers whispering secrets, and yet, beneath every smile, something feels wrong. Too still, too hollow. This is the landscape of Philip Kaufman's Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where the horror lies not in monsters, but in the quiet replacement of everything we love. Donald Sutherland's Matthew Bennell begins the film as a health inspector, pragmatic and skeptical, but when his colleague Elizabeth, played with fragile urgency by Brooke Adams, insists that people around them are changing, emotionally erased, he begins to unravel. Together with a small band of survivors, they flee, resist, cling desperately to their humanity. Each betrayal cuts deeper, each loss makes the world feel colder. Released in 1978, the film was both homage and reinvention of the 1956 classic. Where the original was a metaphor for McCarthy-era paranoia, Kaufman's version reflected the disillusionment of the post-Watergate generation. The counterculture was fading, individuality felt under siege, and trust, whether in government, neighbors, or even lovers, was collapsing. The final moment is one of cinema's cruelest betrayals. A scream, guttural and alien, tears through silence. Eyes widen. The audience realizes that even their last hope is gone. That sound became legend, a scar on celluloid echoing across decades of horror and science fiction alike. What lingers most is not fear, but sorrow. The idea that love itself can be replicated, hollowed out, and replaced with something unfeeling. That perhaps is the most shocking ending of all, not death, but emptiness. 4th Blade Runner, 1982. Neon rain falls across the sprawl of Los Angeles, A city lit by fire and haunted by shadows. Rick Deckard, a tired Blade Runner, hunts synthetic humans who want nothing more than to live. Their faces are flawless, their hearts are flawed, or perhaps it's the other way around. Harrison Ford plays Deckard with weary detachment, a man doing his job yet slowly unraveling with every encounter. The replicants he hunts, especially Roy Batty, played with aching ferocity by Rutger Hauer, are not just villains. They are seekers of life, desperate poets in borrowed flesh. Their presence transforms the hunter into something softer, sadder, more human than he thought himself capable of being. Ridley Scott's Blade Runner was released in 1982, a box office disappointment at first, overshadowed by louder blockbusters. Yet, with time, it grew into legend. Critics later hailed its visionary design, its meditations on identity, and its noir-infused melancholy. Few films have captured the collision of beauty and despair with such precision. The ending, famously altered between theatrical cuts and director's cuts, left audiences haunted. A small origami unicorn, a fleeting dream, a question left hanging in smoke. Was Deckard himself a replicant? The answer never mattered as much as the doubt it planted. That ambiguity transformed Blade Runner into more than a film. It became a riddle, one that every generation must solve anew. The shocking ending is not revelation alone, but reflection. It asks whether we define life by years lived or by moments that matter. And in its final, rain-soaked silence, Blade Runner whispers that perhaps machines are not the ones struggling to be human. We are. 5. The Thing, 1982. Snow whirls across the endless white of Antarctica. A helicopter chases a desperate dog through the ice. Shots ring out, but no one yet understands the terror hidden in that animal's blood. John Carpenter's The Thing begins not with a monster's roar, but with suspicion, and ends with a silence even more terrifying. At its heart is R.J. MacReady, played with rugged weariness by Kurt Russell. A helicopter pilot, pragmatic and sardonic, he becomes the reluctant leader of a group of scientists stranded in isolation. As the creature reveals itself, not through brute force but through assimilation, the men turn on one another. Fear spreads faster than infection. Trust is destroyed, replaced by paranoia and the chilling realization anyone could be the Thing. Released in 1982, The Thing was a box office failure, dismissed by critics as nihilistic and overshadowed by E.T., which offered a kinder vision of extraterrestrial life. Yet time reversed that judgment. Today it is revered as one of the greatest sci-fi horrors ever made, a masterclass in practical effects and atmosphere. Rob Bottin's grotesque creature designs remain unmatched, dripping nightmares made flesh. The ending lingers in cinematic history. Two survivors, MacReady and Childs, sit in the snow, exhausted, unsure if the other is still human. Neither trusts the other, and yet they share a bottle, resigned to freezing as the camp burns. That ambiguity is the sting. The audience leaves without answers, only dread. The final breath of the film is not closure, but a question. What if evil survives not in monsters, but in the spaces between us? 6. Brazil, 1985. Fluorescent lights flicker, machines hum. A fly falls into a typewriter, and bureaucracy spirals into chaos. Terry Gilliam's Brazil is not futuristic spectacle. It is nightmare as satire, a comedy where laughter catches in the throat, and in its final moments, hope itself is exposed as an illusion. Jonathan Pryce stars as Sam Lowry, a daydreamer trapped in a suffocating totalitarian system. He escapes only in his mind, soaring on wings of fantasy, rescuing a mysterious woman who haunts his imagination. His romance with Jill, played by Kim Greist, offers him a flicker of something real, something human amid the steel and paperwork. But in Gilliam's world, love cannot outfly the weight of the state. When Brazil was released in 1985, its production was nearly as chaotic as the world it portrayed. Universal executives hated its bleak ending and fought to release a Love Conquers All cut with a happy resolution. Gilliam rebelled, fighting for his darker vision. Critics who saw the uncensored version praised its biting humor and Orwellian terror, calling it the 1984 of cinema. The ending delivers its cruelty with artistry. We think Sam has triumphed, escaped, and found freedom, only to learn it was fantasy. In reality, he is broken, humming softly to himself in a chair, lost forever to madness. The dream was only a dream. The shock is not gore or violence, but despair, disguised as beauty. Brazil endures as a film that dares to say what others won't. Sometimes the system cannot be beaten, and sometimes escape is only inside the mind. The most shocking ending isn't death, it's realizing freedom never existed at all. 7. The Fly, 1986. A man steps into a shimmering machine. He emerges the same, or so he thinks. David Cronenberg's The Fly takes science fiction's oldest dream, instantaneous transport, and turns it into one of cinema's most heartbreaking tragedies. Jeff Goldblum gives a performance both exhilarating and terrifying as Seth Brundle, a brilliant but eccentric scientist. His teleportation device promises to change the world, but when a housefly slips into the chamber with him, his DNA begins to warp. At first, the transformation feels like triumph, strength, stamina, even genius magnified. His lover, journalist Veronica, Gina Davis, watches with both awe and dread as his humanity slowly unravels. By 1986, audiences thought they'd seen it all in body horror. Yet Cronenberg pushed further. The special effects, grotesque and unflinching, shocked even hardened viewers. But beneath the slime and horror lay tenderness. Seth's slow decay mirrored disease, addiction, the cruel erosion of love in the face of mortality. The film struck chords deeper than simple fear. The ending devastates. Once a man of brilliance and passion, Brundle becomes a monstrous hybrid, a Brundle fly. His final act is not rage, but plea, a silent request for mercy. Veronica, trembling with grief, delivers it. The audience is left in stunned silence, not because of gore, but because the monster we saw die was a man we had come to love. The shock of The Fly is not in its transformation, but in its humanity. Few films remind us so cruelly that the line between genius and ruin, love and loss, is as thin as the membrane of a wing. 8. Total Recall, 1990. Dust storms sweep across Mars. Memory and reality blur into dream. Paul Verhoeven's Total Recall is a labyrinth where every answer unravels into another question, and the ending leaves the audience dizzy, grasping for truth. Arnold Schwarzenegger stars as Douglas Quaid, a construction worker plagued by visions of a life beyond Earth. Seeking escape, he undergoes a memory implant at the company Recall, only to find his dream of being a secret agent may not be fantasy at all. His journey through Mars is filled with betrayals, double identities, and the strange allure of a rebellion led by mutants. Sharon Stone shines as his duplicitous wife, while Rachel Ticotin provides the grounding spark of rebellion. Released in 1990, the film was both a box office hit and a lightning rod for debate. Critics praised its spectacle and relentless pace, though some dismissed it as pulp dressed in philosophy. Yet its themes, memory, identity, the slippery line between illusion and reality, kept it alive in conversation for decades. The ending twists the knife. After liberating Mars, Quaid kisses the woman of his dreams but pauses. What if this is a dream? He asks. The camera lingers. The screen fades to white. Is it triumph, or merely the fantasy Recall implanted in his mind? The answer never comes. That ambiguity turned Total Recall into more than a thrill ride. It left audiences questioning the very act of watching. Do we crave truth, or are we content with beautiful illusions? The shocking ending is not revelation, but suggestion. The idea that sometimes reality is less satisfying than the dream. 9. 12 Monkeys, 1995. Snow drifts across an airport runway. A boy watches a man fall, gunned down in a chaos of sirens and panic. That boy's eyes widen in shock, and in that instant, time folds back on itself, revealing the cruelest twist of all. Terry Gilliam's 12 Monkeys doesn't end with salvation, it ends with inevitability. Bruce Willis stars as James Cole, a convict in a ruined future where plague has forced humanity underground. Offered a chance at redemption, he is sent back through time to trace the virus's origin. But time, in Gilliam's world, is not a river one can divert. It is a loop, merciless and unchanging. Alongside him is Catherine Rayleigh, a psychiatrist played by Madeline Stowe, whose journey from skepticism to belief forms the emotional spine of the film. Their bond is fragile, tender, a romance doomed by the very laws of fate. When the film was released in 1995, its bleakness stood in sharp contrast to the glossy blockbusters of its era. Inspired loosely by Chris Marker's haunting short La Jetée, 12 Monkeys fused science fiction with dreamlike surrealism. Critics praised its ambition and Gilliam's Baroque visual style. Audiences were unsettled, unsure whether they had watched prophecy or nightmare. The ending lands with devastating precision. The vision that haunted Cole's childhood of a man's death at an airport was his own. He dies before Rayleigh's eyes, completing the circle. The plague still spreads. The future remains broken, and the child who witnesses it all grows up to repeat the cycle. Shock gives way to melancholy as we realize there was never escape, only recognition. What makes the ending endure is not its cleverness, but its cruelty. It reminds us that time does not always heal. It traps. And in that trap lies the deepest terror of all, that our destinies may already be written. 10. The Sixth Sense, 1999. A child's voice whispers, "I see dead people." The line chilled audiences in 1999, yet its true weight wasn't revealed until the final minutes. M. Night Shyamalan's The Sixth Sense is not just a ghost story, it is a meditation on grief, unfinished business, and the shattering discovery that the past is not what we believed. Bruce Willis plays Dr. Malcolm Crowe, a child psychologist burdened by a failing marriage and professional doubt. His patient, young Cole Sear, played by Haley Joel Osment with uncanny solemnity, suffers visions of the dead. Their relationship begins in fear but slowly transforms into trust, a fragile connection that gives both boy and doctor purpose. The quiet tenderness between them anchors the supernatural in raw humanity. When the film premiered, it crept into theaters with little fanfare, but word of mouth spread like wildfire. Audiences emerged stunned, whispering about its ending, urging others not to miss it. The film became a cultural phenomenon, earning 6 Oscar nominations and redefining the twist ending as a modern Hollywood weapon. The revelation arrives gently, devastatingly. Crowe realizes he is dead, that his life since the opening gunshot has been a liminal state. His work with Cole was real, but his personal redemption comes too late to heal the marriage he thought he was saving. The audience shares his dawning horror and sorrow in silence. The shock endures not because it surprises, but because it reframes every moment before it with new meaning. Scenes once mundane are suddenly tragic. The story becomes not of ghosts but of love unspoken, words left unsaid. In that, The Sixth Sense transcends its twist. Its ending doesn't just shock, it haunts, lingering like the whisper of a child in an empty room. 11. Donnie Darko, 2001. A boy in pajamas wakes on a deserted road, a jet engine having just fallen from the sky into his bedroom. Jake Gyllenhaal's Donnie Darko is no ordinary teenager. He is a dreamer haunted by visions, a soul dancing on the edge of madness and destiny, and his story ends not in triumph but in sacrifice that bends the fabric of time. Released in 2001 to modest box office but feverish cult acclaim, Richard Kelly's Donnie Darko is the very definition of a cinematic riddle. It blends suburban malaise, time travel paradoxes, and teenage alienation into something that feels like poetry written in shadows. Donnie's visions of Frank, the eerie man in a rabbit suit, are both prophecy and curse. His romance with Gretchen offers a fragile light amid the darkness, a reason to fight against the inevitability closing in. The ending arrives like a tidal wave of melancholy. Donnie, realizing that his survival unravels the lives of those he loves, chooses to remain in his bedroom on the night of the crash. The engine falls. This time, he dies. Time collapses into itself, erasing his survival and resetting the world. Gretchen lives, but she will never know him. The neighbors wave as strangers, haunted by an inexplicable sadness. The shock is not the mechanics of time travel, but the emotional punch. Donnie's death is both defeat and transcendence. He becomes martyr and mystery, his laughter at the end a chilling acknowledgement that he has glimpsed truths too vast for the rest of us. What lingers is the sense of destiny, that some lives are meant to burn brightly, briefly, shaping others through absence rather than presence. Donnie Darko doesn't resolve neatly. It dissolves into memory, a dream we wake from unsure whether it was nightmare or revelation. 12. Arrival, 2016. A child runs through a sunlit field. A mother whispers to her daughter. The images are tender, familiar, achingly human. Yet in Denis Villeneuve's Arrival, these glimpses of life are not memory at all, but the future waiting to unfold. Few endings in science fiction have landed with such quiet, devastating grace. Amy Adams delivers one of her most profound performances as linguist Louise Banks, tasked with deciphering the language of alien visitors. The heptapod's speech is not linear, but circular, a language that reveals time itself as non-linear. As she learns to think as they do, Louise begins to remember moments that have not yet occurred. The future becomes as vivid as the past. Released in 2016, Arrival was hailed as a triumph of cerebral science fiction, a rarity in an era of explosions and spectacle. Critics praised its emotional intelligence, its patient pacing, and its marriage of cosmic wonder with intimate human drama. It earned 8 Oscar nominations, cementing itself as a modern classic. The ending reframes everything. The daughter, whose life and death Louise seems to mourn at the beginning, has not yet been born. Her visions are of the future, one she chooses to embrace, even knowing the pain it will bring. Jeremy Renner's Ian, her partner, will leave upon learning the truth. Yet Louise accepts it all, joy and sorrow intertwined, inevitable and inseparable. The shock is not revelation alone, but the courage it demands. Most shocking of all is not that Louise sees the future, but that she chooses it anyway. That decision transforms Arrival from a puzzle into a meditation on love, loss, and the beauty of moments destined to fade. Its final whisper is not despair, but acceptance, a reminder that sometimes the most Profound endings are not explosions, but quiet choices made in the face of inevitability. Science fiction has always been about journeys to other worlds, to the future, to the hidden corners of our own souls. These 12 films remind us that the greatest journey of all may be the ending, the final twist that reframes everything we thought we knew. Subscribe, like, and stay with us because cinema always has another secret to share.